Good evening. Welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm your host, Sam Chase, and our guest for this show is Town Engineer Christina Papadopoulos. And I said that correctly, I'm sure. Okay, that's good. And we're very pleased to have you with us, Christina, and we're going to be focusing tonight on the discussion of our stormwater management program and everything that's related to that. But before we get into that, what we'd like to do is have our guest just give a little bit of bio on your educational and professional background, and perhaps tell us how you came to work for the town of Chelmsford.
Sounds great. Well, thank you very much for having me here tonight. I really appreciate it. So my background, well, I started off as a young girl being really interested and very good at math and science. And as it turns out, engineering is a great path for anybody who's interested in math and science. So started to learn more about that in high school and decided on an engineering career path to go to college and major in engineering. Now, what kind of engineering was, that was the next question. Mm-hmm. There's so many different kinds. So I explored all the different ones, and it turns out I really like seeing an end product after my hard work. It was about getting something built and getting something done. So civil engineering, you get to do a lot of different things where you get to see, a final building or a final finished project. I really liked that idea. So I went to UMass Lowell, and I graduated with a degree in civil engineering. And in the meantime, I did a lot of internships to try and find out, okay, now which kind of civil engineering would I be best suited for? And I sort of fell into some internships in the land development field, and did a lot of surveying. So I got to see projects from the very beginning of the concept of, a big forested area to what they wanted to develop it into, and sort of the whole design process. And I really fell in love with that, and decided to make that my career. So when I did graduate, I got a full-time job in a land development consulting company, and I did that for a few years. And then I decided that I would like to try municipal engineering.
Oh, so, that's a leap.
I was like, well, I also moved from New Hampshire to Massachusetts, mm-hmm. and an opportunity in the town of Westboro, Massachusetts came to be, and it looked like all of my interests really lined up with what the town of Westboro was offering. And so I worked for the town of Westboro for 7 years. But I lived in Chelmsford the whole time.
Oh, wow, wow.
So I commuted down to Westboro, and that's a good 40-minute commute. And
on a good day.
On a good day, yeah, 495, and it was good. I loved my work. I loved what I did and everything about it except for that commute. So the job opportunity just opened up in Chelmsford, that they were looking for somebody with exactly my qualifications in Chelmsford, and I was really not a hard decision to apply for the job in Chelmsford, and that's how I wound up in Chelmsford. So I came to Chelmsford in 2013.
It's been that long. Wow.
yeah. So
I guess I didn't realize that you were a Chelmsford resident before you became employed. That's interesting. So, well, I think that's another plus. If you can hire somebody in any municipal job who obviously meets the qualifications and satisfies the requirements of the job, and that person also happens to be a resident, I just think that's a plus, because you obviously have a feel for the town. You've been here a number of years, obviously. So
exactly.
And you have an investment in the town, and I think that tends to translate into your job performance.
It definitely does.
Because you have to live here.
I do, and I chose to live in Chelmsford, mm-hmm. With my husband, and so it's a place that I was at that time looking forward to raising my children in. I do have children now, and they're in the school system, and felt that was a positive decision, and to work in the same town that you live, so I can be close to my children, mm-hmm. While they're in school. I think that's very valuable. So to have that positive, work-life balance. And meanwhile, do something that I really enjoy doing. That municipal engineering piece, working for the residents of the town. I take pride to say that I want to help people. So this is one of the best ways I get to do that. I get to help improve the quality of their lives and ensure safety by looking at the engineering in an engineering perspective.
No, I think that's fantastic. And for those who don't know, and I could certainly use a little education on this myself, maybe you could spend just a minute and tell the audience exactly what does a town engineer do, what are you charged with, and who works for you, and those kinds of relationships. If you could spend a minute on that.
Oh, of course. Yeah, so the town engineer before me was Stephen Yonley, and so he got promoted to Assistant Director of Public Works, but I'm still working for him, so that's the...
okay, so the relationship is the town engineer does report ultimately to the DPW management.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so part of my role as town engineer is to provide support for the various town boards and the various departments within the town and residents with anything regarding engineering to the maximum extent that I can to ensure safety and to make sure that the rules and regulations that the town put forth, this is how we like things engineered and this is how we like things designed and all of our bylaws, and those are all followed when there is development. And same thing with installation of, infrastructure.
And any state codes that would apply as well.
Yes, and any state, federal regulations which apply, as well as, so that's one part of it. The other piece is the stormwater management piece, which you had touched upon. So there are federal regulations from the EPA regarding stormwater. We'll get more further into that, but so I make sure that we comply with all the EPA regulations for the town's stormwater management program. As well as I oversee all the GIS mapping. So if you recall, before I started in 2013, if you've gone on the town's GIS and you've looked at it, you'll notice we have a whole bunch of new layers. And those, so we have all the sewer layers are in there now, and the drain layers are visible. So those were all things that I was working on. And I'm still working on, and so gathering that information and making it available to the public, because I think the more that a resident knows, the better. The more information that's available to them, why not make it available? So working on things like that, sharing maps, looking up plans and for residents, helping them decipher if there's an easement there. Let's see, and any infrastructure improvements that go on, like a culvert replacement and alike. Those types of projects, I would oversee the bidding and construction of those types of things as well. And that's a general overview of what I do.
I think that's a very good description, and the job responsibilities are very comprehensive and wide-ranging, and the compliance aspect is very important as well, as you've noted. So it's quite a responsibility. Let's get into the stormwater management mandate, as I call it, because that's what it is, although when it first rolled out a couple of years ago, a lot of the municipalities really didn't take it seriously as a mandate. A lot of the political discussion in some of our neighboring towns was, well, maybe the federal government ultimately won't enforce the rules, and it's a lot of money, and where are we going to get the money? And well, that's a very nice discussion, but mandate means you have to do it at the end of the day. So at some point when you get a federal or a state mandate and it's put upon the municipality has to figure out how they're going to do it and how they're going to pay for it. And we tackle that in 2 stages in our town. So maybe you could just take what I've just said and build upon that a little bit and generally describe what exactly is stormwater management, what is the requirement, why do we have to comply, and why it's important. That's a tall order.
I know, I can talk about that.
And you've got 20 minutes.
I could talk about stormwater for many, many hours. So I'll consolidate this. So even when you said, going back to where it all began. I mean, 2003 was when they first started the MS4. The EPA required all municipalities who had urbanized communities that had a significant amount of impervious area. That means rooftops and driveways and such. If you had a lot of that, then you had to comply with their permit. You had to apply to EPA for your drains to outlet into a water body of the U.S.
All right, so I hate to interrupt your
Yes.
train of thought, but you just said something that I guess I probably wasn't aware of.
Yes.
So based on what you just said, I'm inferring that if you are a really small town, you don't have to comply. For example, I'll just pick a town, Dunstable, for example, under 2,000 population. Would they be subject to this mandate?
In 2003, they were not, and they
Okay.
would be considered a new municipality under the new permit. So
Okay.
they did have to start to become in compliance with the new
Right.
permit.
So ultimately, everybody's going to have to do it.
Well, no, there's still, some towns that don't. But,
Okay, all
but
right.
for the most part, the eastern part of Massachusetts, we're pretty urbanized.
Right.
Leading up to Worcester.
Certainly
And
all the
so,
surrounding towns to Chelmsford are going
Definitely.
to have to comply with this mandate.
Correct. Yeah. So, so it started in 2003. That was a 5-year permit, which they were supposed to reissue a permit. They didn't get around to issuing a draft until 2010, and all the towns, all the municipalities said, "Hey, this new draft permit, that's too much. We don't like what what you're putting out to EPA." And so they went back and they drafted another one. And then we came back out and we said, "No, that's too much." We went back and forth a few times. And then
Negotiation.
a little bit, yeah. So they did. They listened and they revised it. Ultimately, in 2016, they released the final permit. And so they told us that we would need to comply, with these terms, and that was going to begin 2017. So we knew that all this was coming. Obviously, 2010, we knew approximately what the EPA was going to be requiring of towns, so that they would comply. So we started to think about, what do we need to do to comply? How can we afford, doing all this work? And so, let's see. So in Chelmsford, we have 650 outfalls. So compared to other towns, that's quite a bit. So outfalls are the point at which a pipe outlets into a water body. So all of our storm drains, they collect the water, and all that water goes to these outfalls. And these outfalls are the points that are regulated by the EPA. So we had to think about how are we going to go about and fulfill all the requirements. Again, we have 4,500 catch basins in town. So just the numbers in Chelmsford made us think, we really have to really think about what it is we need to do.
And this is, at this time, this is totally outside the capacity of the existing DPW to deal with.
Right. So
Right.
that's a great point. We have 230 miles of road
Right.
in Chelmsford that the highway department's already taken care of. So now we have an additional, 650 outfalls, 4,500 catch basins, which are not on our radar. I mean, we're cleaning them, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, but all the additional work that is being required under the permit is not covered. So additional work being the EPA requires us to do additional testing on all those outfalls. So we have to test them in wet weather and in dry weather. We have to do additional mapping. So like you saw, the additional maps, the GIS maps, how they've improved is because we knew the EPA was going to start requiring better maps of our drainage system. So we started cracking on that. And same thing with, we needed to start doing more public outreach. So, we developed a plan of how, to systematically go out and little by little get the word out there about storm drains, about stormwater pollution. And one of my favorite parts is going to the fifth grades. I go and visit the fifth graders with a tabletop model of of a watershed. It's called an enviroscape, and I give them a lesson on stormwater pollution. I'll be going, I think, in a couple of weeks. I'll be going to McCarthy, fifth graders. So that's part of the outreach program. The other things that were required in the permit is additional culvert and drainage improvements, such as retrofitting those that can be retrofitted for improving water quality. So we have a certain amount of pollution in our water bodies, and we need to target those water bodies that have an excessive amount of pollution and try and get rid of them. So all of this, obviously, when you think infrastructure improvements, that's a big price tag.
Yes.
But we don't want to just go around and start picking places that we think are important, just because we think that they're a better place to start. So we wanted to come up with we thought the idea of a stormwater master plan would be a good starting point. So the stormwater master plan would go ahead and so we hired Weston and Sampson to put together our master plan. The master plan basically prioritizes all of our infrastructure and all of our stormwater management program, and so it helps us to identify areas that need attention first, and it also helps us identify areas where we can easily retrofit stormwater improvements. So, an outside consultant is better at seeing the big picture and where retrofits have worked in other municipalities, where we might be able to benefit from a similar mindset.
Right.
It's
always good to know what other people are doing. I think that helps you manage your program going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So so that was the master plan. So we're working on that actively, and so let's see. I have. Let's see.
What kinds of resources have you had to add or allocate to this new program? As I said before, 3 years ago we didn't have a stormwater management component to our DPW, but in order to comply with all of the requirements, anybody who paid attention during town meeting and listened to the discussions understood that this was a monumental undertaking and that the existing DPW staff would not be able to handle this. So you had to put together essentially a department to handle this. So what kinds of resources are we talking about in terms of people and capital expenditures, equipment, and things like that, over and above what we would normally do without a stormwater management?
Well, knowing exactly all the requirements that we needed to comply with, we knew exactly how many more people we would need to fulfill that. So we went through and looked at, we came up with an ultimate budget of how much money we would need to raise. And that included so now we currently have a new stormwater foreman, 3 operators, 3 truck drivers, a stormwater engineer, and a GIS manager, including additional equipment for them to operate. Obviously, they can't use the same equipment that if the highways department's out doing fixing structures, the stormwater department can't be using the same vehicle. So with their own vehicles, I don't have a list of the vehicles.
Well, that's okay. Do these folks report directly to you, or?
So they report to ultimately Steve Yalney.
To Steve, okay,
Yes.
all right.
Yes, but
it's an engineering-driven situation. At least that's my perspective of it.
Right.
You guys are in charge. You've hired Weston and Sampson, and they're an engineering firm, and it's an engineering-driven and managed program, which certainly gives me a lot of confidence that it will be handled correctly and will be in compliance. And what should a community not be in compliance and audits are done, inspections are done? What's the damage in terms of fines that these folks will have to pay?
I think it's up to $50,000 a day for non-compliance.
A day.
Something like that.
That can add up
quite
pretty fast, I would
Quite a
think.
bit. So yeah, that was never an option.
That's a very powerful argument to get your house in order.
And they have fined certain towns for non-compliance. You're mandated to submit an annual report every year about what you've done, and a few towns did not submit their annual report.
Not
and
good.
the fine, it's a simple thing. So we managed to submit our annual report on time. Haven't had any fines. They did come knocking on our door asking for additional mapping information.
Oh, really?
Before I came,
Okay, that's good.
But they did. They came knocking on the door. They said, hey, can you just provide us with additional information? And, no problem. We had all the information, so it's just a matter of providing them what they asked for, and it was easy peasy. Got them what they were looking for. So they're, the Stormwater Division is just actively working.
Well,
every day.
I've seen, of course, I can't tell just from looking out my window, but whether it's, well, I suppose if I looked hard, I could see the lettering on the truck. And I know they clean catch basins. My recollection is that they did it maybe once a year before. Does that sound right?
Right. So
okay. So on my street, I'm on River Meadow Drive, which is in the center of town. You probably know the area. Well, in the last 6 or 8 months, I think I've seen at least three cleanings of my catch basin, which is right in front of my house. So I know that most of that is probably the stormwater management situation. So they're on the job. If you see more than one cleaning in a 6-month cycle or an 8-month cycle, you can assume that that's stormwater management personnel doing their job. So that's great. I mean, you got it up and running, I think, fairly quickly. Were there any hiccups at all, or was it a fairly smooth rollout? I mean, you've described a situation where the town really was on the case going back to 2010, really, in terms of looking forward on how do we comply, and I think that speaks volumes as to the quality of our town management, that they would try to get out in front of this. Again, I have friends in other towns that, they just have come to the table kicking and screaming and dragging their heels and, talking about at the 11th hour how it's going to be funded and things of that nature. And we seem to have gotten way out in front of this issue, and the residents benefit for that because it's done smoothly. Speaking of impact, now everybody in town is impacted by this regulation. We have our residential population, and we have our commercial and industrial population, which of course would have most of the impervious roof surfaces and parking lots and things of that nature. So can you tell us a little about how the fees are going to be assessed and what typically a split might be between a typical residence and a typical commercial property?
So we decided on doing a tiered system for the stormwater fees. So as you recall, the town meeting voted for a stormwater utility to incur fees, and those fees would be collected and stored in an enterprise fund that would pay for all of the stormwater improvements and to pay for the stormwater division.
Now, an enterprise fund, for the viewers out there, just to remind viewers, an enterprise fund means that the charges are collected from the residents and the businesses, and that money cannot be used for anything else other than the management of the particular program for which the fee is being charged. It does not go into the town's general fund. It cannot be siphoned off for use in any other area. It stays within the accounting mechanism for the stormwater management.
Right, which is why it's very important that that we created an enterprise fund.
Correct.
So that it's just for that purpose.
Correct.
and nothing. It couldn't be used for anything else. And the residents knew that we were taking this very seriously. And so the tiers are split up based on the amount the budget that we knew we would need to collect. So we sort of calculated what we would need to charge in order to collect the certain amount that we needed, and we have the 2020 budget is $1.127 million. So the residents are getting billed twice a year on their sewer bill. They'll see $20 twice a year, so $40 a year for residents. And then based on impervious area, any non-residential and some multifamily buildings are getting fees based on which tier they're in. There are 18 different tiers.
And it's based on the square footage of impervious surface?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so the lowest tier, I believe, is $250, and the highest is $8,000. And that's a year. and that's based on how much impervious area you have.
That sounds like a very fair way of doing it. So if you're a resident, typically with an average roof square footage and an average driveway, you're paying $40 a year, billed twice. But if you're a huge shopping mall with large parking lots and a lot of flat roof area and so forth, then you're going to pay more because you are causing more of the potential pollutants as a result of the stormwater runoff. And that seems eminently fair that those who contribute more to the problem should have to pay more in the remediation. So that makes perfect sense. I'll tell you, Christina, this is all very interesting stuff, and I think obviously you could talk about it for several hours, and I could listen to it for several hours. I find it very interesting. But we've got about 5 minutes left, and I want you to touch upon the mailer that you folks sent out, because I think this is an excellent vehicle for informing the general population about the stormwater management, and you focus on a lot of residential advice here about how to handle your yard waste and what not to put down storm drains. So if you could just spend the last few minutes talking about that, it would be great.
Thank you. So part of our requirements are to produce public outreach, and so we developed the yard waste general information flyer, which everybody should have already received in their mailbox, and it has some very valuable information. In addition to, we have an additional hazardous waste day this year, and it is on November 2nd at the DPW. That is an excellent addition to our existing program, which we've always had one in the spring, and we listened to the residents and they said we want another one, so there's going to be another one November 2nd. So instead of dumping your hazardous waste down a storm drain, please don't do that. We would appreciate you to bring your hazardous waste to the DPW on November 2nd. Also, this is the time for leaves and yard waste, so also don't throw them down the storm drain, or don't pile them in the dishes behind your house. If you do choose to rake your leaves, I mulch mine because I don't like to pick up leaves.
Who does?
But some people
I'd rather
do.
shovel snow than rake leaves. That's how I feel about it.
So if you use a leaf blower or
Yep.
you rake your leaves, there's a leaf bag drop off at the DPW on November 23rd from 9 to 1, and also you can bring your brush. If you have brush, you can drop it off at the community tree. They'll take them up to 6-inch diameter and 8 feet long, and all this is free. This is an amazing opportunity for residents of Chelmsford. Just bring your photo ID saying you're a Chelmsford resident.
What about the bags? Do we supply the bags, or does
It's paper bags for your leaves,
Right.
or you can bring them in a bin because they'll just take the
Or a
bin.
truck.
Or if you have
if you have a small pickup? Yeah.
small pickup, perhaps.
Or a friend.
Because then it has to go from the pickup, it has to go into another dumpster. So you
Okay,
still need to
all right.
provide something, a vessel to sort
okay,
of
that makes sense.
transport them. And it also has information on why it's important to clean up after your pets, because the pet waste contaminates the waterways with its bacteria. It has twice as much bacteria as any other wildlife, like geese. So pick up after your pets, throw them in the trash. Don't throw anything down a storm drain. It all winds up in a water body. We have polluted water bodies in town. Let's keep them clean.
It's amazing to me how information evolves and develops on just about anything, but especially environmental things. I'm 72 years old, okay? So when I was a kid in the 1950s, in the late 50s and early 60s, and I was getting into automobiles and doing my own maintenance and things of that nature, which I still like to do, but I can remember, guilty as charged, I can remember dumping my motor oil down the storm drain, and nobody thought anything of it. And I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. We just didn't think in those terms. And then the 1960s, the late 60s hit, and we all became more environmentally conscious. And I think it's great that's happened. I think it's wonderful that the town has taken such a proactive approach. And as I said earlier, and you've reiterated, that we were really ahead of the curve in terms of where most towns were in trying to comply with the federal mandate on this situation. So one last word again to tell the viewers, check your mail, make sure you got the flyer. If you have any questions, please call the Town Engineering Department, Christina Papadopoulos. Christina and her staff will be more than happy, I'm sure, to discuss any question you have relative to what your requirements are in terms of helping the town to comply with stormwater management. Christina, thank you very much for appearing on the show. Very informative, very interesting, and I anticipate we'll have you back at some point. Thank you.
Thank you very much.